G'day. Today we're going to be talking about medieval footwear. Alrighty, so today I'm going to be talking about several different types of footwear that were both common in medieval period. So starting off simple, we have our ghillie brogue boots, or in this case, shoe. This is a very old shoe design from, it's dated back down as far as Roman and even Greek period, and just remained a fairly common staple throughout the periods. They are extremely simple to make and only requires a little bit of stitching up the back, and the back portion can be made at almost any height you want, whether it be fitting as a low shoe or higher up to wrap around the ankle. This pair I actually made myself out of a Vegetan double shoulder I got at the leather store. I had found the pattern for these online and did my best to scale them to the size of my foot. Now, the tricky thing about making footwear for yourself, and I'll get more into that on a later pair of shoes as well, but the tricky thing is it can be hard to scale them proper because not every person's foot is the same. We're used to, in the modern day, being given ready-made options for specific sizes and widths, but most modern shoes today, they don't actually still fit your foot well. It's not a common thing for those shoes to fit your foot well. It's a one-size-fits-all scenario. And though that sounds a little contradictory of how shoes do work in the modern age for width and length, that's pretty much it. You are given a ready-made option that's one specific size. So let's say my foot size 10.5, and you usually only have one, maybe two options for width. That gets difficult for a lot of people because the width is where it counts once they have the length down. A lot of people don't have wide feet and a lot of people don't have narrow feet. With these, I actually ran into the problem of the back for the online pattern I had was way too low, so they barely cup the back of my heel. I have, though, still put a lot of wear into these, and surprisingly for how much I've worn them, you only see the wear points, which is the darker areas on the sole, in the areas where most of my weight has been when wearing these. I've probably put, since I made them, likely, I want to just guesstimate, I've not worn them for long distance. It's mostly been just around my property when enjoying myself and goofing off. I would say at this point I've put 10 miles into them, and they fit surprisingly well. The leather itself is pretty hardy and can take a beating. The only downside with this pair is the back side is too low. These kinds of shoes were so common that there's even evidences of them being worn in winter, usually with a thick, heavy wool sock that you would put on, and then you would put the shoe on. And in a few cases, I've seen a different number of reenactors actually make a secondary larger, heavy-duty wool sock with a thick leather sole that they can fit this inside of, almost like a snow boot. So they'd have their stocking, their shoe, and then the boot that goes around. That, I am pretty sure, is more of a SCA anachronism and not a true period historical method of footwear, as I've not been able to really find any evidences on it, although the two fighters I know who do that both have said they found evidences, but I can't find the sources they're talking about. So this is a set of bog shoes, and these ones have actually been modified over time. These ones I have probably put a lot of miles on, and I'm honestly surprised that the suede I made it out of, these were both scrap leather builds, so just random suede I had left over. I was giving a try to making a pair of bog shoes, and I just simply put, I wanted to make something very simple as a test pattern, and I had this ugly greenish gray suede left over. I've probably, since making them, I've probably put maybe 20 or 30 miles on these things, and I am surprised that the suede has not worn through. It is somewhat thick, but not overly so, and for the amount of wear on the bottom, it is fairly smooth, but the suede has been pretty absorbent to the damage. Originally, they did not have this upper flap that goes around my ankles. So when worn, they would stop right at the height of the ankle. And the first time when I made these, I wore them. I was actually a cabin dad at a summer camp for high school students. So everywhere I went when I was there, I was actually wearing these. And that was a 2-week event. And I think only once I actually wore actual shoes, and that's when we did, no, twice. That's when we did bicycling and rock climbing. Everything else, hiking, walking, going to the lake, anything else we did, I was wearing these things. And by the end of it, my feet actually were quite comfortable. When you first would wear a pair of this type of bog shoe, your feet do feel just about every rock underneath of them, but because of the thickness of the leather, it does help act as a pad to prevent your feet from getting really busted up when stepping on rocks and such. Downside is because it's open top, because it's basically just a big leather. It's a half circle attached to the end of a rectangle. So it's basically just a big leather bag you put on your foot with an open top. All kinds of stuff gets in the top, rocks, dirt, grass, seeds, everything. It can get a little annoying at first when you first start wearing them, but you get used to it after a little while, and soon it doesn't really bother you. What's interesting about these shoes is these were even seen in, maybe not at the end of their time, but somewhat common use in Europe and the UK, even up until the 1960s. I mean, this is probably one of the easiest shoe designs anyone could make with any materials. All you need is just to figure out how big your foot is, get a piece of leather, a razor knife, and a shoelace, along with maybe a little thread for stitching up the back, and you can yourself make a pair of bog shoes. These would be the easiest pair of footwear to wear at any kind of Renaissance fair, as acceptable footwear should it be a reenactment event style of Renaissance fair versus just leader Renaissance fair. I doubt that any marshals would be able to gripe at the style of footwear you're rocking. And honestly, out of all of them, these are truly my favorite because of how nicely they fit and how easy it is to get used to just wearing them for daily use. There's things you can do to try to seal off the top so that you're not dealing with all kinds of stuff coming in, but at that point they end up being more of a moccasin rather than a medieval boot. So coming to the last pair of self-made boots that I made, these are half turn shoe and half, I don't know what to classify them on because of the method I made them in. So these are a rough base off of medieval footwear that I've seen. It's really simple design. I've got two little wraps that go over the top and come around to the side so that they can be tied together. And the way it goes is first the bottom wrap goes over, followed by the top. When I made these, there was one thing I had not known very well about footwear, and that was the sole. The sole of the shoe is very important in the positioning of it. When I traced my foot, I was sitting in a chair, leaned down and traced my foot over a sheet of paper. Now that left a unique profile to where it's almost looking like a bean leaning to one side and out on the middle. Something I didn't know was your foot sits at a different position when in a sitting position or in a leaning forward position. Your foot stabilizes itself to gain, just naturally without you really realizing it, to gain proper balance for that. As a result, when I wear these, my heel is not sitting in the center of the heel of the boot. It's actually offset heavily to one side, where the center of my heel is within this half-inch range of area, and it pushes out quite a bit here on the back side. When making these boots, I probably made them at least 2, 3, maybe even 4 times. I went through the process of making them with different methods of learning how to cut them out, how to size them, how to shape them, how to just do everything that was needed to make them properly fit a foot. It was an interesting project. Something else I did was I actually have 3 layers to the sole. I have a lighter leather, which is the same leather as what the outside of the boot is, stitched on the inside. On the outside, I have another layer of that leather, sandwiching the boot in on itself. So the boot curls in and is stitched to those 2 soles. Then I took I think this was 12 or 14 ounce Vegetan leather and hobnailed it to another piece. So these boots are all hobnailed. Those two pieces then I had attached through stitching to that other layer of leather on the inside of the shoe. So these actually have a pretty gnarly thick sole. And for what they are with their flaws, they're still quite comfortable and quite nice to wear. I have better traction with these in slicker environments, such as if it's raining and it starts getting a little slick in the grass, things like that, just because of the nature of the way the hobs work. However, on wood and metal surfaces, they are way slicker. It's almost like wearing a pair of skates, so I have to be very aware of that. They don't quite want to bite into the wood very well, and metal they don't want to bite into at all. When making these, I actually wanted to use as little leather and stitching as possible. So instead of being multiple pieces stitched together, I was trying to do something like how a turn shoe works. So when I cut them out, I made it to where I only had to stitch up one side and across the tongue. I had to add a tongue onto these because of the way the two tabs for wrapping over sat. They were a little bit too high. So once the boot was tied, I had a pretty large gap right in here that allowed access into the top of my foot. And I was trying to keep things like dust and dirt out. So I had to stitch in an artificial tongue. That part is not normal. That's more of a modern anachronism. And in the medieval period, they would have actually had a proper way of making the boot stay sealed. A little piece of advice I will give someone who's trying to learn how to make their own boots is the first pair, you're going to have to do quite a number of tries to get them right. But when you finally get them right, you will be quite pleased with the result. These I wear often, and at this point, I could not tell you how many miles I put on them. If I'm going outside just to wander around, I wear them. If I'm going outside just to check the chickens, I wear them. If I'm going outside to grab a dog or two, I slip them on. They're kind of the all-use service boot I wear almost on a daily period. So those were the self-made boots. We're going to now get into the pre-made store-bought boots, or slippers in some cases. And the first pair is the pair I wore last year. I've worn them once for a long period of time, and that was at the Renaissance Fair that my area has in the fall. And that is this pair of almost like a slipper. So these can be found on Medieval Collectibles, Cult of Athena, and Dark Knight Armory. They're about the most simple kind of shoe you can get, and these are a men's shoe. Now, what's unique about these is the point of the toe. Pointed toes were very common in the medieval period, as well as being able to slip on easily for a townsman's shoe. These were more of not so much a work footwear, but more of a going about footwear. What designated work footwear from going about wear at the time that this particular period of shoe was whether or not they had a top to keep the top of the boot sealed from things getting in, such as I've mentioned, dirt, grass seeds, and rocks, things like that. These would be worn more by someone that might be going around their own home or going around town. They did have a somewhat rugged sole that was put on them. It is stiffer than some medieval shoes I've bought that are pre-made, and it did pretty well for what I needed it for, and I was not discomforted by them. Surprisingly, these, for just how simple they are, they're quite comfortable. I can't complain much about them. And I honestly would recommend them for the price. Me and my friends, we all had gone as monks, Franciscan monks, and this is the footwear we wore. Only one of my friends had any complaints, but understandably, in his case, he has flat feet, and without any kind of arch support or heel, these are not something I can recommend for anyone with flat feet, unless you have a way of putting a proper arch support in this style of shoe. Next are probably one of the most worn boot that I do wear, and that is this pair of 14th century low boots. And these, I use them for just about every one of my videos. They are extremely simple in design. They're similar to the ones I made for myself, except in place of having a tab that ties to one side of the boot, it actually has a wrap that you can wrap around the ankle and then wrap the lace around back and forth until you can tie them shut. These are very great for just about anything you might want to do, whether it be SCA related, reenactment, for the time period that they're set or you're in. And they have a fairly broad reaching time of use, which makes them a very easy choice to continue wearing for a lot of events. The sole is pretty robust, and what's nice about this pair of boots and the last pair is they actually hobnail the entire outside edge instead of stitching it. A lot of turn shoes tend to stitch the outside, and that stitching, of course, you're walking on it. It can wear out, it's not going to last forever, whereas the hobnails, the only thing that's going to make it come away there, it's going to come away only in that spot. Your entire stitching won't unravel, and you'll just have to deal with figuring out how to re-nail it, re-tack it, whatever you need to do to get it done. For comfort, these, just like the last shoe, I have no complaints about these, and I have always been satisfied with this pair. And of course, for all the store-bought boots I have, I will put links down in the description so you can see if you want to try them for yourself. The downside about this particular boot is when they come, the lace that they're sent with is actually very lightweight. This is not the shoelace that they come with. This is actually just a Walmart special that I bought and put in because I needed real laces on them. They come with a very thin leather tie that's put in and tied in a bow in the front, and it's too short to actually wrap around the boot properly, so you can't tie it the way they're supposed to. It's more of decoration than it is actual useful piece of the boot. Other than that, though, these are pretty durable. They're a good quality boot. Marshall Historical is the ones who I think made this pair. If I'm wrong, of course, as always, I will put the correction here. Other than that, though, so far on the store-bought boots, they all get a 10 out of 10. This particular brand is also probably one of the best ones for medieval pre-made boots because their quality control is quite high. Lastly is not really a medieval boot. These were not a common medieval boot. However, a lot of people just, when they're looking for boots, they're looking for this style in particular because the high boots always just look so good. Now, downside with this boot that I've had an experience wearing them is they have a thin layer of leather glued on to the bottom of the sole, and the toe has a tendency to curl back and the glue break away. I have in the past tried to re-glue it, but it always comes undone. At this point, I'm going to have to just cut off the toe portion and figure something else out. Maybe try to score the leather a little bit and put a piece of thicker leather on the toe as a wear point, and using a little bit stronger leather cement. But other than that, that's really the only main flaw that this particular style has that I know of in that regard. Another issue, other than the sole, is where the boot attaches to the toe right in here. Right at the peak of the arch for the boot itself, it puts a lot more pressure right in here on the toe. So the stitching has a tendency on several pairs I've seen people leave reviews on where it tears the leather out because of how much pressure is put there. Most of that is because instead of coming to a curling arch where the weight of your foot inside and just working the boot is able to spread out a little more evenly. Instead of doing that, they have it more as a V, so a lot more force is focused on that top point of the arch. And as a result, that's why they have a tendency to tear out. The buckles on the side, they do serve some purpose when tightened up. They do tighten up, of course, the inside of the boot, but it's not really necessary. The boot stays on just fine and dandy without having to do that. And I have quite a bit of room in these. I actually had to buy these by recommendation of someone else, one size larger than the size scale they had on the website, and that actually benefited, and they fit perfectly. So one individual, I think these were off of Cult of Athena, one individual had said, buy one size larger, otherwise they're going to be too small. Doing that was the perfect choice. These things fit me perfectly. So I like to wear these for a lot of my more Ranger-esque style videos and my handgunner style videos. Mostly the handgunner style videos is because this is coming into the age of pike and shot where this type of footwear was just beginning to be seen within iconography. And because of the fact they're a lot taller, I don't get nearly as much inside my shoes and boots because these help keep a lot of the dirt, rocks, and grass seeds out. Although now and then, bizarrely, I do somehow get a rock that flies up high enough to where it actually gets inside the boot. These ones I also can recommend someone get, whether it be this pair or other pairs this brand does have, mainly because of just the functionality of them. I've worn them to many Renaissance fairs. I wear them for my videos. I wear them just around the farm for just general wear, and they held up quite well, even with the flaws that are here. I've not worn the sole out yet. With this thin skin, if I can peel this thin skin off, I'll actually probably glue a much thicker layer of leather on over top so that it better holds up to a lot more walking and just general wear and tear with their use. So with all this said, what am I getting at in this video? The first 3 boots I covered were all boots that I made myself. The first 2 were made just one and done. They're extremely easy to do. Anyone can make them, just so long as you have enough leather and a razor knife. The third pair of boots I went over were a lot more complicated. Those ones take a little more thinking, a little more practice, and a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot more waste and material because you're going to likely be making them a couple of times before you get them right. Medieval footwear is really easy to get right when you do it simple, such as I'd had with the bog shoes and brogues. These, you can't go wrong with using these. They're extremely simple shoes, and the time periods that they cover is very broad. Unless you're trying to reenact a nobleman, if you're just a common townsman or just a common soldier, you can get away very easily with wearing just something simple like this. Then when it comes to a little bit fancier footwear, you can start actually looking around elsewhere if you just don't have the skill set or patience to make your own. Both these shoes were quite cheap. They're not expensive, and they perfectly fit the use you might need for medieval footwear. Lastly, if you're just trying to make a caricature for something such as a cosplay or LARP, you can't go wrong with this particular type of boot. What I'm getting at here is this is just all plain and simple experience from someone who's gone deep into the medieval footwear rabbit hole, someone who's experienced both sides of it, whether it be ready-made, store-bought footwear or homemade footwear. You can make your own footwear, even if you have no skills. A pair of bog shoes you can make with just a little bit of leather, a pair of heavy-duty scissors or a razor knife, and a shoelace. They are the easiest shoe anyone can make, and you will actually enjoy the idea that you made those yourself. It wasn't someone else who made them for you, you made them for you. When it comes to the store-bought shoes, you can get a little bit more higher quality product than if you were to make something for the first time than yourself. Such as when I made these, I had a little bit of misunderstanding of how the foot worked. And as a result, they did suffer in quality by being offset as they are. However, these boots, I still love them. They're still my favorite shoe, and they've worn the best over time. They've gotten to a point where even the leather is starting to follow the contour of the arch of my foot, and even just getting to a point where the heavy wear points are finally starting to show wear on the hobnails. Anyone can make a shoe, but it just takes time, skill, and effort to make it right. And with the next pair I make, I'm probably going to take these apart and try again. And regardless of whether it's a success or failure, I'm still learning something in the process. And that's a lot of why we do this, is the learning process. It's a lot of fun. Hopefully I can actually do a few more videos getting into this, maybe doing some hikes with each type of shoe and my impressions of how they work for things such as that, except for definitely not the bog shoes with a hike. My feet are not in the same shape they were when I was wearing them at that camp. So that thin leather is not as thick as it was then either. So these I probably won't be doing a hike with, but definitely going to remake a pair of these. If you want to see that as another video of the making process of the Brody boots, then let me know down in the comments and we'll make that happen when I make a new pair. Other than that, thank you for watching. Let me know what you want to see in the next one down in the comments. Until then, take care.